Nicholas Liam, the English dub VA for Dan Hong, gave out a really dope speech, and then at the end of it, it was revealed that we would be getting his new form for absolutely free, and I am shocked. I am speechless. I don't have any words to say. I didn't think we were going to be getting a new character again so soon, considering the fact that we just got Archer back in 3.4. Then when I took a step back and I thought about the surrounding context, I'm like, okay, this somewhat kind of makes some degree of sense in some capacity. And I had to tell myself, there are people out there that don't care about the fake collab. So even though Archer was provided for free for those particular players that didn't care about the collab at all, Archer may as well have not ever existed, essentially. So for those players, they've gone even longer without having a free character. The next reason why this makes some degree of sense to me is because we are getting Anomaly Arbitration as another in-game mode. More than likely, we are going to have to use 3 sustains. I suspect there's a good portion of the player base that up to this point have been relying on Gallagher and maybe 1 limited sustain, or maybe they lost a 50-50 to Fu Xuan or Japard at some point in time, so they've been making do with that particular character. So I do think the timing on this is very good in regards to this new in-game mode that's going to be coming out. Players are obviously going to be able to claim them starting October 15th, and that will exist into the end of 4.0. I do think Dan Hong's animations look pretty dope, and I did see that he is going to be an AoE shielder who will be able to remove a debuff from the entirety of the team, which is going to be the first, because Japard and Aventurine have never been able to remove debuffs. They've just maybe potentially been able to increase the resistance against them. So that's going to be new, because I think prior to Japard and Aventurine, March 7th was our only preservation character who could remove debuffs, but this was only on a single target basis. So he's going to be the first in that aspect. I also saw that he is going to have a follow-up as well. I'm suspecting to allow Aventurine to still have his competitive edge. Aventurine's follow-up is probably going to be a lot more frequent than Dan Hong's, but only time will tell. We also found out within this next upcoming patch, along with the new in-game mode, there is now going to be a new type of dice. I think it was called an intelligence dice or something along those lines, and we can use that in congruence with a variable dice to lock out a particular substat and prevent any of the rerolls to go into that particular substat. I think this is going to be fabulous for a lot of players, especially if you had a item drop and 3 out of the 4 substats were really good and that 4th one was just I've got a lightning orb actually that has 3 out of 4 substats that I want for Acheron, and it has effect hit rate on it. I don't want anything to roll into that effect hit rate, so now I have a way of working around that finally. So that's more than likely what I'll be using that variable dice and that intelligence dice on, to hopefully get this into a working state so that way I can start using it on Acheron. That's my plans anyways. March 7th, her animations look pretty dope, pretty cool. She is set up to want to have a lot of remembrance characters in her team to help boost her efficiency, so I'm kind of interested in seeing how she'll perform and how people will like her. I think her design looks really dope. I think Dan Hong's animations look pretty solid, and that's really all I have to say about those 2 particular characters. Now, one thing that I will say in regards to the Anomaly Arbitration mode is for the first round of enemies that we're going to be getting, it looks like we got the trio again, so this is probably going to encourage Super Break, and then we have Meme Zone, who I believe has only been on Memory Chaos 12 a single time, so that boss is probably going to be pushing T.O.T, and then we finally have an Elite who is probably going to be pushing Archer or Finon. It's going to be very interesting seeing how players who have Finon and a Harmony oriented account, how they're going to manage with their Harmony characters, because they never invested into Nihility like hardly at all. So since Finon takes up so many Harmony characters, I wouldn't be surprised if individuals start pairing Finon with the new form of Dan Hong, just so he's not eating up all of the Harmony characters. It'll be interesting seeing how those players make the adjustments. For somebody like me who doesn't have a big emphasis on Harmony characters, but I invested into the Nihility path pretty heavy, even if I were to have Finon on my account right now, I would be able to make a Finon team and it wouldn't really have nearly as big of a detriment on my account, unless of course I wanted to run Super Break also, which I could probably still find a way to work around it, because I could always use Trivi or Bronya with Finon, and then I could just save Ron May for another team or something along those lines. I'll figure things out once new in-game mode gets here. I am very excited for it, although I do suspect it's something that I'm going to have to gradually build my way up to. And that's really all my thoughts in regards to the 3.6 preview. I think Evernight looks pretty cool. I think the animations look really solid. Same thing with Dan Hong's new form. I think he looks pretty solid. I like the dragon animations, and I'm looking forward to building building him and messing around with him, seeing what kind of teams I can put him in. I'm more than likely probably going to be retiring Japard, since Japard doesn't really provide that good of personal damage. I'm hoping this new form of Donghong at least has some means of personal damage, which I suspect he will, because that's been the trend with sustains now in these days. They're not just sustaining and providing utility, they're also providing some means of personal damage as well. Interesting stream preview. We'll have to wait until that new in-game mode drops before I can really give more comments on it. One thing I did notice is that if you are able to make it to the final boss, even if you only get a bronze rating, you will still get one of those lock dice items, which I think is really cool. And then obviously they got the silver and the gold. I'm suspecting the gold might be for like Leviathans, but we'll have to wait and see how accessible this is going to be. All right, so if you are still watching this, more than likely I have Honkai Impact 3rd gameplay in the background. I am going to briefly talk about my thoughts on the 3.3 and the 3.4 storyline. So if you have not gotten these particular items and if you haven't seen this particular quest on your screen, that means you have not made it through 3.4. I don't want to spoil you, so please click off of this video, go do the story, enjoy the epicness, then come back and watch the back end of this part, because I'm not taking any responsibility for spoiling you. Just gonna keep it 100. Alright, so in regards to the 3.3 storyline, I do think the area where we dealt with the Aquila Titan was pretty dope in my opinion. It felt like we were going through this obstacle course of a maze, gradually changing the environmental settings from a sunny setting to a dark, stormy, rainy setting. We cornered Aquila, finally got into that fight. I think the fight itself was pretty cool, although one thing that I will kind of have as a criticism, even though the thematical song for that fight I think is really nice. From a lore perspective, when it kicks in, it makes sense. But from a gameplay perspective, I think it does mess with the flow of the fight, because if you have a pretty well off account, by the time that song starts to kick in, the fight's almost already over already. Or if somebody is really welled out, the fight's already done. So if you're in that position to where the fight is almost complete already, what's going to end up happening is, if you want to listen to the whole entire song, you have to like really just stop the fight. It kills the momentum, and I think that's the only thing that I disliked about the fight itself. One thing that I thought was pretty interesting was when Aquila got up again and was one throw hands again for a round 2 after the core flame had been attained. I thought that was pretty dope how that was handled. And the Day Thunder Knight, who had ascended to becoming a Titan, I liked the back lore on this character, and it was very obvious that over time they lost their sense of humanity and they became very disconnected from humanity itself. Obviously there's a lot of stories that hinge on this kind of a topic matter, like a human ascending into a god or a human living for a very long time. Eventually they become emotionless or they become disconnected from those around them. It's a very common writing trope, so I wasn't too surprised that it was done here. It's very, very common. All right, now I'm going to talk about my favorite part of 3.3, Cypher's trolling. My goodness, what an absolute giga chat. She literally baited the Flame Reaver like 3 different times, and finally the Flame Reaver like caught her and like was like "Argh!" and just yeeted her and, you know, ganked her, which was very unfortunate. And, you know, as she was dying out, she was talking to a golden beetle who was supposed to have been the spirit of Aggie, and the reality was it was just a regular beetle. When that happened, that made me really think to myself, like, wow, maybe all those past conversations that Cypher was having with that golden beetle was just a manifestation of a lie that Cypher had convinced in her head. And so this whole thing that was driving her the whole time was a lie that she had told herself. The god of trickery was living her own lie and using that as a motivation to drive her through. I thought that was very interesting story writing right there and execution on that. I really do enjoy that, because again, that makes me go back and think of those past conversations where she had with a golden beetle. Was there ever really a golden beetle there to begin with, or was all of those thoughts just in Cypher's head? I have the suspicion that was just lies being manifested from Cypher's head. That's just my personal opinion. And finally, in regards to Cypher, her and Zagreus pulling off this massive troll on everybody on Akuma and being like, you know what? You and Zagreus was straight up like, you think Catholic was keeping you all protected? Oh, absolutely not. My plan with Cypher was to tell the biggest lie of all time. And we trolled all of you. It was us. We were the ones ones who were really protecting you by convincing all of you of a lie. And then Zagreus pops out the core flame and gives it to them, and he eats out. I was like, you know what? I can't even be mad. Why am I even? I'm shocked that they pulled off such a big troll, but that's just how those characters are. And I thought that was pretty hilarious in its own right. Finally, the last thing that I'll comment on in regards to 3.3 is that Cyrene meets up with March 7th. And the only thing I'm going to say about this is peak glazing. I don't think I have ever seen two characters glaze each other so hard in Honkai Star Rail history. You know, if Elysia was to clone herself, I could see this conversation going very similar, which unironically enough, March 7th is a variant of Elysia. And let me explain what I mean by that. So the preservation version of March takes a lot of influences from Elysia and Honkai Impact 3rd. Both use a bow, both have an ice elemental form, both have pink hair, both of them like to do adorable / cute things, both of them love to be complimented for being cute or adorable or awesome, something along those lines. I think the main difference that I've picked up on from March 7th versus Elysia is that March 7th does tend to be less trusting of people in comparison to Elysia. I think there was a backstory on Elysia in Honkai Impact 3rd when she was a little kid. I think she got conned out of some food by another little girl, and then when the little girl was bragging about it, Elysia was like, oh well, you know, I still got some stuff left. Do you want some of this? And I think it mentally broke that little girl, because I guess the little girl was expecting Elysia to act out in rage or be angry or something like that. Elysia was just way too pure in Honkai Impact 3rd's universe, at least in my opinion. Mirio, you're not slick. I see exactly what you're doing. Literally running a variant of Elysia and then running Elysia XP herself in the very next patch is some absolute diabolical work. Now, people who have never played Honkai Impact 3rd probably won't pick up on that, but I definitely did. You managed to somehow make a variant and then an XP run back-to-back patches as new characters, by the way. Crazy work. 3.4, just gonna say it was pure insanity. The fact that Finon was going through millions upon millions of cycles, having to kill his comrades over and over and over and over again, carrying millions upon millions of core flames. And that mofo, he kept a number of every single interaction, and I liked how they messed around with the special effects as he was walking closer to each flame chaser. There was glitching memories of past interactions of him going through the same process, and I think the English dub VA for Finon really showed good range here, going from optimistic young man to being somebody who's stern and determined to somebody who's being super cold. I think the range really showed in 3.4, and Lygus was like, you know what, I will be patient all day and I will wait for you to mess up. And then Finon was straight up telling him, he's like, you know what, you would have thought after all this time you would have tried to come up with a different speech or something along those lines, because this ain't working. And he's straight up, and more or less he's basically telling him, it's like, I'm not gonna give you your Ever Nova that you want. I'm gonna find a way to break this cycle. I don't care how long it takes. That kind of determination and to carry that rage for so long, whew, that man is not someone to be messed with. And I get why he ended up carrying on the name of Castellana, because in Honkai Impact 3rd, Kevin Castellana, by the time we meet him in the present, he's already a very cold and detached character, which is what ended up happening to Finon once he went through the process of becoming Castellana. Ended up being very cold, very disconnected as well, because he was only focused on one thing and one thing only, and that was the objective. I think he just eventually grew numb to defeating his allies over and over and over again. And I will say, for the finale animation that was at the end is absolutely cinema. Now, me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the song itself, but the song, in my opinion, is very fitting for the scene. And I think the big takeaway that I have from this is you don't have to be an Eon to harm another Eon, or you don't have to be an Eon to potentially kill another Eon, because Finon was actually able to damage Nanook. It was a small scratch, but it was still something, because up to this point, I've had the impression that in order for an Aeon to be defeated or to be harmed or something, it will take the effort of another Eon, because we've already seen this in lore. I think one of the Eons got absorbed by another one, and we've had certain Eons just outright be killed by another Eon or a group of Eons. So this gives a lot of possibilities for the future. It opens up so many more questions, and I'm very interested to see where things will go from here. In my opinion, Finon definitely is at Emanator tier when he has the Castellana form. There's no doubt in my mind that his power is on an Emanator level. Just absolutely insane. That's all the thoughts I have for today's video. If you had taken the time to watch this or listen to this, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. You be safe out there. Deuce. pieces.
You want to take advantage? More enemies. This combat.
I weep for the departed.